In our Wheelbarrow Series class today, we're going to talk about an often unsung annual, marigolds. Tagetes is a genus of annual or perennial, mostly herbaceous plants in the Asteraceae or sunflower family. They are native to the southwestern United States down all the way to South America. Marigolds were discovered in the 16th century and brought to Europe and northern Africa, where they were quickly adopted into the gardens. The tall marigold naturalized in northern Africa by the time the British were introduced to it, so hence they named it the African marigold. It's similar with the smaller version, which were introduced to the French gardens first, and when they got to Britain, they called them the French marigold. Marigold does have a long history. In Mexico, marigold was regarded as the Day of the Dead flower in pre-Hispanic Mexico, and it's still sold in the markets and is considered a remembrance flower. In Spain, marigolds were favorites to be placed on the altar of the Virgin Mary, which is where it actually got its name. Mary's gold became marigold. In India, the flower has a religious significance and is known as the friendship flower. And by the early 1800s, marigolds were well known in American gardens as well. Joseph Beck, author of The Flower Garden in 1851, described the French marigold as one of the old-fashioned flowers deservedly popular from the brilliancy and variegation of its flowers. It was considered old-fashioned in 1851, which is kind of found that ironic. The name Tagetes means born from plowing of the earth, which is likely referenced by how easily the plants germinate and grow, and they are quite easy to grow here in Kentucky. In warmer regions, the plants can also regrow from previous year's stems. Obviously, that's not going to happen in our cold climate, but if you lived further south, it very easily could happen. Tagetes erectus is often termed African marigold, and Tagetes petula is termed French marigold, although all marigolds are actually American. Marigolds are used in a lot of different ways because of the musky, pungent scent. Some varieties are said to deter pests. Most of the research doesn't pan that out. Tagetes does, in fact, exude antibacterial properties into the soil, however, which would probably be a reason you wouldn't want to grow them next to legumes or beans, because remember, legumes can fix their own nitrogen through the help of a bacteria. Well, if we have an antibacterial plant growing next to it, the legumes are not going to be able to fix as much nitrogen as they would otherwise. Marigold is often added or used as a colorant for several types of foods, including pasta, oils, mayos, baked goods, dairy products, mustards, and poultry feeds. And you can see the egg yolks there, the difference in the color of the hens giving feed with added marigold and hens giving feed without marigold. And you can see a much darker color or more orange yolk with the added marigolds. Marigolds are also a plant food for some butterfly caterpillars, so if a few leaves disappear, let them be. You may get a few more butterflies out of them. Marigolds are also used, some of them, as herbs. Tagetes lucida is used to prepare a sweet anise-flavored medicinal tea in Mexico, and it's also used as a culinary herb in warm climates as a substitute for tarragon. A common name for this marigold is Texas tarragon or Mexican tarragon. Another marigold that's used as an herb is Tagetes minuta. It's native to southern South America and is used as a culinary herb in Peru, Ecuador, Chile, and Bolivia. It is used as a paste to make potato dishes and said to have notes of sweet basil, tarragon, mint, and even citrus. First off, if you want to grow marigolds, we need to prepare our beds, new or existing. First off, you should always take soil samples. I would probably go ahead and plant now if you didn't. But in future talks, we always say it's good to have a soil sample. You need to collect anywhere from 10 to 15 plugs per area. You can probably get by with 5 per area. Collect soil from the surface down to about 6 inches deep. Mix those samples together, bring them into the office, and we'll put them in a bag. We really don't need but basically about a cup total. Also, in Washington County, the soil tests are free. As far as fertilizing, always go by your soil test. If you didn't have a soil test, you want to make sure that we'll just add general fertilizers, but you do need to adjust your pH between 6 and 7. Most of our native pHs in this area is going to be between 6 and 7, but some people have some that are a little lower than that, so you would need to add lime. You want to apply general fertilizers or specific nutrients based on your soil test, or you can just do general if you don't know what your soil test is. You want to apply these prior to planting. You can also fertilize during the growing season, and the nutrients can be applied with a granular fertilizer, a liquid fertilizer, or even you can go organic if you want to use manures or compost. But there's no general specific rates for these unless we have a soil test. Most of us would probably use maybe for 1,000 square foot bed, we'd probably use maybe 10 pounds of triple 10. Full sun is required for marigolds. They are a hot weather plant. They come from a hot climate, and they do prefer full sun in warm weather. You want to select a spot with adequate drainage. They do not like to have wet feet. So if you've got a low spot, they're not going to be the best bet for that area. And also before planting, make sure you do work the soil up. You can dig it, or you can loosen the soil with a tiller, a spade, a hoe, whatever it takes. You can loosen that soil up because a loose soil to start growing in is going to be a much better spot for a marigold. As far as weed control, you can use landscape fabric, but for most of us, this is an annual. We're probably not going to go through the trouble of putting landscape fabric for an annual, but you can definitely put mulches down. That's going to conserve moisture and also keep your weeds down. A weed-free straw is good. When I say weed-free, it's free from weed seeds, but also free from wheat seeds. You don't want to go through the trouble of putting straw down and then having wheat plants growing everywhere. Wood chips are another option. Make sure that they are aged. Do not put fresh wood chips on around your plants because the tannins can kill some of the plants, and it's just not a good practice because it's acidic. Also, wood mulches and wood chips are going to pull more nitrogen from your soil as they decompose. So you're probably going to have to add a little bit more nitrogen during the growing season to keep the plants growing healthy. You can also put compost at yard waste or compost around the plants, which they would really appreciate that as well. As far as herbicides, after the plants are actively growing, and remember this is after they're actively growing, you can put a pre-emergent around them to keep other weeds from germinating. And a preen is what we would know as what we would usually buy at the big box stores. And it has a pre-emergence in it that would keep those weed seeds from being able to germinate. If you have to, you can also use non-selective post-emergence herbicides. Most of those are going to be glyphosate, which is the active ingredient Roundup. Diquat and paraquat, I'm not sure is even on the market anymore, but you wouldn't want to put those around your plants either because they would kill a lot of broadleaves. Also, you would want to avoid anything with 2,4-D in it close by because these are broadleaf plants and 2,4-D readily kills broadleaf plants. If you want to start some indoors to get a jump on the season, it's always good to do that. You can use some good seed starting medium. The more expensive stuff is usually worth it. Not always. We'll put that disclaimer in there. You should assume that you're going to get good germination with these seeds if they've been purchased in the last couple of years. If they're this year's seeds, definitely, but if you're saving them for multiple years, you may want to do a seed germination test before you actually go to the trouble of planting them. Also, you want to place planted seeds under grow lights for optimum conditions early in the season to get these plants, a short, stocky plant, or a very sunny south-facing window, which is going to be pretty hard for most of us to have that. So there's a picture just asking which would you prefer to see. If you look closely, these are not marigolds. These are different kinds of flowering plants. But the one on the left, the ceilings are short and thick and squatty, which is what we're looking for. The one on the right are stretching, which means that they're not getting enough light. So if you're under a grow light, the way you remedy that is to lower your grow light as closest to the foliage you can get it without touching it if it's one of the grow lights that's not hot, which is fluorescent or LED. You can also start these outdoors, which is the easiest way to do it because they germinate quite readily, especially in warm weather. You want to plant your marigold seeds about 1/4 of an inch deep. Do make sure to create a nice loose seed bed again for them because they'll germinate much better in that condition. Also, don't worry about sowing them too thick because these transplant really easily. You could thin them if you don't want them, but you could also thin them and then transplant the seedlings to other areas or other beds in the garden. Here's some examples of just the French types. We have, you can see the different names of them there, but you can see there's a lot of different patterns. There's singles and doubles in the French type of marigolds. Most of them are going to be in the yellow, red, and orange, except for the really light yellow down there, the Illumia Vanilla Cream. The African types are the larger flower types. You have to watch on some of these now because some of these varieties will get 3 or 4 feet tall, and some of them will only get a foot tall. So they've done some breeding on getting these shorter, but some varieties are tall and some are uh, short. The taller ones really make really great cut flowers. One possible major problem you can have, especially if it's a hot, dry year and this is in a sheltered location, is spider mites. You can see that plant there is completely webbed over by spider mites. They're all over it. This plant would be best to just be disposed of to get it out of your garden because those spider mites will spread to other plants. It's really not cost effective to try to control these with sprays because you would need an actual miticide to control those and they're pretty expensive and they're not worth the cost of maybe 1 or 2 marigold plants. Now you could have started earlier spraying this plant with the water hose pretty briskly under the leaves and stuff before it got to this bad, and you could have knocked those populations down and maybe saved your plant at least during that growing season. But definitely, this is by far the most major insect pest on marigolds, and it's not really even an insect; it's a spider. So, but this is going to be a hit or miss on these. If you're in a hot, dry location, you've had spider mites there before, you're likely going to have them, especially on marigolds. Another problem you might have early in the season are slugs, or if we have a wet summer. These can eat a plant pretty quickly, and maybe over one night. The easiest way to get rid of these is to use slug bait. You can just sprinkle slug bait around those plants, and they'll eat that bait and be gone pretty quickly. If you wanted to, you can go through the coffee can bearing up to even with the soil surface and filling that full of, or putting a few inches of beer in the bottom of it, and maybe they'll crawl into it and drown that way. But the slug bait is by far the quickest, easiest method to get rid of slugs. If you grow marigolds, they do make great cut flowers. You want to select flowers that are just opening. They're going to last the longest. Also, you want to cut early in the morning because that's whenever the flowers are going to be the freshest. You want to get the stems in water immediately after cutting because they will wilt pretty quickly after cutting. And then if you're going to store the flowers for a while before you do your arrangement, you need to cool them down as quickly as possible, and that's down around 35 degrees, which is hard for most of us to do, but that's something that the professionals would do. And then you want to store your cut flowers also in high humidity if you're not going to be able to work with them pretty quickly. The main thing is when you do put these into an arrangement, you want to make a second cut underwater. That way that stem doesn't have a chance to dry out. It's going to stay wet, and you'll know you've got good water flow through that stem, and it's going to keep that flower as fresh as possible. To get your cut flowers or your cut marigolds to last the longest, there's a couple of recipes here that you can use. You can use a lemon lime soda mixture, which is 1 part regular lemon lime soda. Has to be the regular. We need the sugar here. With 3 parts of warm water and a quarter teaspoon of liquid bleach per quart of solution. So that's just going to keep your plants from getting a bacterial problem. It's also going to keep them fed with a little bit of sugar to keep that flower a little happier. Another method, if you don't have lemon lime soda, is the lemon juice mixture, which is basically just 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. It can be fresh or bottled, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and a quarter teaspoon of bleach per quart of warm water. And you'll just mix that together. And basically, you'll have the same thing as the lemon lime soda mixture. A few little basic floral design tips here. The arrangement should be 1.5 to 2.5 times the height of the vase or the length of the bowl or tray. You can measure from the rim of the container to the top of the tallest flower. Also, you want to only use 1 or 2 or even 3 colors. 4, not counting green, is a maximum on most flower arrangements. And you'll notice that if you start paying attention to some of the florist arrangements, usually they'll stick with just a few colors. 2 or 3 types of flowers are usually optimum. 4 is pretty much a maximum here. And these are not rules; these are just suggestions. So, if you like more color or more different types of flowers, that's fine. Buds and small flowers at the top and outer edges with the larger flowers at the bottom is usually, and center is usually a norm. And then light colors at the top and darker at the base. There should be 3 lighter flowers to every dark if they are the same size as well. And when less than 12 flowers are used, it's best to use an uneven number. Most people don't realize this, but even in landscapes, an uneven number of groupings of plants or in landscapes, it just looks nicer and looks better to our eye. even though we may not notice it until actually somebody points it out. So for those that registered for the class early, you're going to get seeds of several types of marigolds to try at home. We're going to have the Inca Mix 2 there. That's an African marigold, which is a little shorter. Then we have Safari Bolero, which is a French type there in the middle with the true red and yellow mix. And then we have a couple new ones here. We have Cocoa Yellow, which is a really deep yellow. And we have Cocoa Deep Orange, which is a really deep orange. And both of those are African marigolds as well. And you can really even tell in the picture here how much deeper their color is than Inca, but they're a little bit taller than Inca. And then we have Durango Yellow there, which is a semi-double French in the middle, and then some relatively new color in Marigold is white here, and we have Kilimanjaro white there at the bottom, which is also an African marigold, and also is a little bit taller than some of the other marigolds, which makes a really good cut flower. A couple more disco mix there. It's a single mix on the top left, and then a couple varieties here. One really new and one really old. We have Strawberry Blonde there at the top. That is a new to this last year or two on the market marigold, and it has got kind of a pinkish uh, sunset hue to it. That one is really new. And then we have Burning Embers at the bottom, which is really old French type. Both these are French types, by the way. But it is a large French type, which you can get 3 or 4 feet tall, but it tends to flop, so you had to tie it up. It's an old variety, but if you look there, you can see that it has got the deepest red of any of the new ones on the market. I know that's a quick rundown through marigolds, but there's really not a lot, or they're not really hard to grow. You can save seeds from year to year if they're not hybrids. Even if you had seeds from the hybrids, may not get the same marigold back, but you'll have a pretty plant to plant back. And a lot of times these will seed themselves back in their locations, especially if they're grown in containers. But if anyone has any gardening questions, whether it's marigolds or anything else in horticulture, you can call me at the Washington County Extension Office at 859 336 7741. Happy gardening.